Welcome to Thou Shalt Not Suffer, the Witch Trial podcast. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
And I'm Sarah Jack.
This is the sixth and final episode of our Connecticut Witch Trials 101 series. We'll cover witch hunting in Connecticut from 1692 onward.
We begin with the story of the other New England witch hunt of 1692.
The Stamford Fairfield witch hunt of 1692 began with the alleged possession or affliction of Catherine Branch, a servant in the household of Lieutenant Daniel Westcott.
On May 27th, Lieutenant Westcott complained to the authorities that his servant had been bewitched for more than 5 weeks.
Contrary to popular belief, the 17th century colonists did not jump to conclusions when a person presented symptoms of affliction.
In Salem, Samuel Parris's daughter and niece were afflicted for about 6 weeks before the first complaints were filed against any suspected of witchcraft. In fact, the girls were afflicted for a month or more before witchcraft was blamed as the cause of their maladies.
In the Stamford Fairfield witch hunt, several neighbors were indeed skeptical of Catherine's fits. Rather than rush to judgment, some conducted experiments, as we'll talk about later.
Author Goodbeer says Stamford people did not assume blindly, but tried experiments to determine.
Richard Godbeer says, "What matters is understanding what people believed and thought was going on and what shaped their behavior."
After 5 weeks of dealing with an afflicted servant, Daniel Westcott was convinced that she was being afflicted by witches. So he complained to Major Nathan Gold, Captain John Burr, Captain Jonathan Selleck, and Lieutenant Jonathan Belth.
He described the affliction of his servant to them.
Catherine's fits started in April of 1692 while she was gathering herbs.
Quote, "She was seized with a pinching and pricking at her breast. She, being come home, fell a-crying, was asked the reason, gave no answer, but wept and immediately fell down on the floor with her hands clasped."
This condition lasted 2 days.
Then Catherine said she saw a cat.
She was asked what the cat said.
I really seriously wonder here, why did they ask what the cat said?
You mean like how they assumed it was talking to her?
Yeah. Why would you assume that the cat was talking because she said she saw a cat? And your first question is, what did it say? Not what color was this cat? How big was it? Where was it? We didn't see a cat.
They knew their witch lore.
I guess, but it still seems strange to ask that question.
It was a leading question, which could have planted ideas in Catherine's mind.
A theme to remember. At any rate, Catherine said that the cat had promised her fine things and that, quote, she should go where there were fine folks.
Her fits continued.
She was asked about the cat again, only now there were multiple cats.
When they spoke, they told her they would kill her.
She saw a table of meats in a room with 10 sitting and was invited to eat.
I have to just stop and say, I think a lot of us think our cats are thinking those words. We just can't hear it. So I can see how if someone is in hysterics at all, them imagining a cat saying it would kill them. It's not that far of a leap.
No, people probably have that dream all the time.
13 days passed and she was still afflicted.
At one point, she had 40 fits in one night, and for the first time, she blamed witchcraft.
She cried out, "A witch, a witch,"
and said that she felt a hand.
The next week, she saw, quote, a woman stand in the house having on a silk hood and a blue apron.
The evening after that, quote, she meet an old woman at the doors with 2 firebrands in her forehand. The woman had 2 homespun coats, one tucked up around her, the other down.
The following day, she named Goody Clausen.
And then she saw Clausen often for a week.
She said in her fits, "Goody Clausen, let's have a turn at heels overhead," withal saying, "Shall you go first or shall I?" Said she, "If I go first, you shall after." And with that, she turned over 2 or 3 times, heels overhead.
Sometime later, she saw, quote, a short old woman and lame, calling her hookback, crumpback, having on a homespun coat and waistcoat and a black cap.
Quote, her master being gone a deputy to the court of election at Hartford, she named Mercy Woodbridge, then changed it to Holdbridge, who lived in Campo.
At some point, she saw, quote, a black woman, thick lips, and of a middle stature, neither old nor young, who had on an old large samar, a dirty shift, and a dirty cap.
Quote, she cried out in her fit, Mercy, why do you meddle with me? I never did you any wrong. What's that to me if my master did?
Quote, the woman told her that he had wronged her in giving in evidence against her.
Quote, sometimes for several days together, she'd be almost wholly dumb. At other times, singing, laughing, eating, writing.
This is another thing that reminds me of Salem. There, the afflicted persons would at times be well and at other times be in their fits.
Catherine supposedly levitated. She was carried up against the planches.
The next night, Westcott, quote, saw her move on the floor upon her back without stirring hand or foot to make that motion.
Catherine was examined by the court on May 27th, 1692.
She named Goody Clausen, Goody Hipshod, and Mercy Holbridge Disborough.
She said, quote, she went thither to Campo on foot by day, and that Mercy was her pilot, thither and back again.
On May 28th, Elizabeth Clausen was examined at a court in Stamford.
She did, quote, absolutely and peremptorily deny herself to be any such person.
She did admit to quarreling with Daniel Westcott 8 or 9 years before.
Elizabeth was searched by 5 women.
Mary Ambler, Sarah Finch, Bethia Wood, Sarah Traherne, and Martha Holmes.
Nothing unusual was found.
Mercy Disborough was also examined at a court in Stamford on May 28th.
Mercy, quote, denied herself to be any such person, or that she any ways knew or was privy to any means whereby the girl was so afflicted.
Quote, she averred that she never saw or knew of the girl before now.
Disborough's body was searched by 7 women, Mary Ambler, Sarah Finch, Bethia Wood, Sarah Traherne, Widow Hardy, Martha Holmes, and Elizabeth Clements.
Quote, they found a teat or like one in her privy parts, at least an inch long, which is not common in other women.
Back in court, Catherine Branch is lying on the floor, looked at Disborough and said, quote, 'tis she, I am sure 'tis she, and presently fell into a like paroxysm, or fit, as she usually is troubled with.
Clausen and Disborough were searched again, and the jury of women returned the same findings. Clausen was clean, Disborough had a teat.
On June 2nd, a special court was held in Fairfield.
Mercy Disborough asked, quote, to be tried by being cast into the water to, quote, vindicate her innocency.
Mercy Disborough was water tested on a Monday.
And she said, quote, do you think that I would be such a fool as to be hanged alone?
On June 4th, 80 neighbors signed a petition defending Elizabeth Clausen.
Quote, since we have known our said neighbor Goodwife Clausen, we have not known her to be of a contentious frame, nor given to use threatening words, or to act maliciously towards her neighbors, but hath been civil and orderly towards others in her conversation, and not to be a busybody in other men's concerns.
At court on June 6th, Mercy was examined.
And witness Thomas Bennett said, quote, Mercy Disborough told him that she would make him as bare as a bird's tail.
Elizabeth Bennett said, quote, Mercy Disborough did say that it would be so pressed, heaped, and running over to her after some difference that was about a sow of Benjamin Rumsey's.
This was apparently a reference to Luke 6:38. In the King James Version, this verse reads, give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, and shaken together, and running over, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that ye meet withal, it shall be measured to you again.
Elizabeth definitely felt like she was getting told what goes around comes around.
she definitely saw it as a threat that you're going to get what you give. And so expect payback.
Thomas Bennett lost 2 calves. Within 2 weeks of this loss, he lost 30 lambs. Later, he lost 2 more calves.
Henry Gray said, quote, Mercy Disborough said she could not abide the said Henry Gray ever since he bought a parcel of apples of her mother, Mrs. Jones. And Elizabeth Bennett Sr. and Elizabeth Bennett Jr. both confirmed this.
Quote, about a year ago or something more than that, he had a calf very strangely taken and acted things that are very unwanted. It roared very strangely for the space of near 6 or 7 hours.
Also, a lamb acted in a very strange manner and died.
2 or 3 months ago, he tried to bargain with the Disboroughs for a calf, but they couldn't agree to a price. Mercy was supposedly pissed. Quote, Disborough's wife was very angry and many hard words passed.
Also, 2 months ago, he lost a cow.
A heifer was ill, so he cut off part of the poor cow's ear and then whipped her with his cart whip. When she ran, he continued to whip her until she was well.
Yeah. WTF is up with these people and the way they treat animals. Quote, the calf he had of said Disborough looked like a new calf. The hammer strokes and crosses was plain to be seen in the calf from the time he had it until a short time before he carried it home. And then in about a quarter of an hour, the calf changed its looks and seemed to be an old calf that had been used about 20 years and that sundry nails appeared which she could not see before. It was some kind of something made out of a calf skin that they called an old calf and would have had hammer strokes and stitches in it.
So Henry was at his brother Jacob's house, and Mercy was there. She said, quote, that because he would not have the cattle, she had said that it should cost him 2 cows, which he told her he could prove she had said.
That same day, and Gray believes at the very same time, one of Thomas Bennett's cows was taken strangely, and Bennett used his cart whip to torture that animal until it acted well again.
And the same day, Gray got home and his wife told him that she had to call for the cart whip to whip a strangely affected calf, but it got well before the whip came.
Anne Godfrey went with young Thomas Bennett's wife to Disborough's house and, quote, told Mercy Disborough that Henry Gray's wife said she had bewitched her husband's oxen and made them jump over the fence and made the beer jump out of the barrel.
But Mercy answered that there was a woman came to her and reviled her and asked her what she was doing. She told her she was praying to her God. And then she asked her who was her God. Also, she told her that her God was the devil. And Mercy said she bade the woman to go home and pray to her God, and she went home, but she knew not whether she did pray or not.
Anne couldn't sleep one night.
But she heard a noise about the house, and also heard a noise like as though a beast were knocked with an axe. And in the morning, there was a heifer of theirs lay dead near the door.
Another time, Anne had a sick sow, and Mercy came by. Anne told her folks wanted to subject her to the water test, but she wouldn't need any water test if she didn't unbewitch Anne's sow, which soon got better.
John Grumman, Sr., about 5 years ago, his child was ill. Young Thomas Bennett threatened Mercy Disborough and told her to unbewitch the child. She approached it, the child, and stroked it and said, quote, God forbade that she should hurt the child, and soon after the child was well.
Thomas Bennett Jr. said he had threatened to tear Mercy's heart out.
Eleazar Slauson said, quote, he lived near neighbor to Goodwife Clausen many years and did always observe her to be a person for peace and to counsel for peace. And when she hath had provocations from her neighbors, would answer and say, we must live in peace, for we are neighbors.
And Clement Buxton confirmed this testimony.
Joseph Sturb and Benjamin Denning heard Mercy Disborough, quote, say, if she were hanged, she would not be hanged alone. He told her she implicitly owned herself a witch.
Thomas Halliburge, the jailkeeper, said Mercy Disborough told him and others that she had been tormented all night. Halliburge told her it was the devil. She agreed and, quote, said that it told her that her soul was damned for yesterday's work.
Mercy later owned this account in court and said, quote, she believed that there was divination in all her troubles.
Joseph Bulkley confirmed Halliburch's testimony.
Samuel Smith Sr. also confirmed Halliburch's testimony.
Joseph Wakeman said, quote, he heard Mercy Disborough say that she trusted in the Lord Jesus, and if he deceived her, she would not have others to trust in him.
Daniel Westcott, June 7, 1692, said he went to Elizabeth Clausen's house on June 6 and talked to her about her actions and asked if she would be ducked. She said she'd do it if Stamford minister John Bishop and the authorities said it was reliable.
Later that night, Catherine Branch had her worst fits yet.
That night, Daniel's child climbed out of bed.
When Daniel returned the child to bed, he lay beside Catherine Branch, quote, to hold in her fits, which being straining, lolling out her tongue, and jumping up and down. And she took hold of my hands, and immediately something whipped me across my face like a cord, that I both felt and heard the stroke, and it smarted for some time after.
On June 13th, Catherine Branch testified to Jonathan Selleck in Stamford.
She claimed she'd never heard the names of the people she had accused until, quote, they themselves told her which appeared to her.
Quote, there is a girl and a woman which the said Kate calls the girl's mother appear to her, and they say they live in Fairfield, but their names she cannot tell, and that also there is two more appears to her, the one from New York called Mary Glover, as she told the said Kate, and the other named Goody Abbison from Boston, as the above said girl told Kate her name.
IRL, Goody Glover of Boston had been hanged in 1688, and a Mrs. Mary Obinson was named on October 10th, 1692, by the afflicted girls of Salem. Obinson was not arrested.
Catherine named Goody Miller, who was formerly called Goody Hipshod or Goody Crump.
Catherine claimed that Goody Miller and Mrs. Abbison, as she called her, were the ones who actually took Daniel Westcott's child out of the bed and laid it on the floor. And Miller again took the kid out of bed last night.
On June 28th, Catherine testified to Jonathan Selleck in Stamford. Last Saturday, Elizabeth Clausen appeared to her and afflicted her worse than usual, held her head back, pulled her arms, and pressed upon her. Clausen afflicted her again, quote, for a night or two following.
Since Clausen was jailed in Fairfield, only Goody Miller appeared and afflicted Kate.
Daniel Westcott backed her up, saying, quote, that on said Saturday night, his maid Kate was extremely afflicted, making a terrible screeching noise, crying out, Goody Clausen, why will you kill me? Why will you torment me so? Her head being bent backwards down to her back. I went to lift her up. She was so extreme heavy that she seemed to me to be 3 times heavier than that at other times, and maid said often, get off of me. 2 or 3 times, in said fit, said Kate, shook, and the bedstead so terribly hard it much affrighted us.
John Finch was a witness that Saturday night, quote, and tried to lift said Kate and found her so extreme heavy that he never found nor felt any the like.
After the interview, Kate walked 40 or 50 rods from Selleck's house and fell down and, quote, looked black in the face.
Jonathan's son, John Selleck, and cousin David Selleck brought her back to the house.
Quote, and coming out of that fit fell a screeching, crying out, you kill me, Goody Clausen, you kill me.
Kate had terrible fits all night and sometimes spoke to apparitions.
She said, quote, I will not yield to you, for you are witches, and your portion is hellfire to all eternity.
She said, quote, Goody Clausen, why do you torment me so? I never did you any harm, neither in word nor action. Saying, why are you all come now to afflict me?
She named Goody Clausen, Mercy Disborough, Goody Miller, a woman, and a girl, quote, whom she called Sarah.
She said, is Sarah Staples your right name? I'm afraid you tell me a lie. Hannah Harvey, is that your name? What is the woman's name that comes with Hannah Harvey? Mary Harvey, the mother of Hannah Harvey?
More cats appeared to Kate.
Also, a creature, quote, with a great head and wings and no body and all black appeared.
He asked Hannah Harvey if it was her father.
She named Goody Staples, grandmother of Hannah Harvey, mother of Mary Harvey.
She fell into a fit, singing songs and then tunes, as Kate said, gigs for them to dance by, each taking their turns.
Quote, then said Kate, rehearsed a great many verses, which are in some primers, and also the dialogue between Christ the young man and the devil, the Lord's Prayer, all the commandments and catechism, the creed, etc., and several such good things.
Quote, some persons attempted to cut off a lock of the said Kate's hair when she was in her fits, but could not do it, for although she knew not what was said and done by them, and let them come never so privately behind her to do it, yet she would at once turn about and prevent it. At last David Waterbury took her in his arms to hold her by force, that a lock of her hair might be cut. But though, at other times, a weak and light girl, yet she was then so strong and so extreme heavy that he could not deal with her, nor her hair could not be cut.
On June 29th, quote, Catherine Branch, coming into her senses about 9 o'clock in the morning, being questioned what she saw and who afflicted her the night past, saith that going homeward she was met by Goody Miller riding upon a black cat.
Jonathan Selleck sent letter to Nathan Gold, a magistrate, dated June 29th, 1692.
He told Gold that his son, John Selleck, would fill him in on the details of the wild night with Kate.
And he related a story about trying to have Goody Miller arrested in Bedford, New York, where she was under the protection of her two brothers, Mr. Thiel and Mr. Ambler, who was there. Quote, Mr. Pell and Justice Thiel would not do anything, even though Kate was taken there and identified Goody Miller.
Quote, Abraham Ambler told Daniel Westcott, he knew what would become of her if she was sent down to us here, he not being willing to do it.
Selleck said that the New York Attorney General would not order Goody Miller taken into custody. Selleck encouraged Nathan Gold to send to the governor of New York to request the extradition of Goody Miller.
Selleck suggested that he could write to Colonel Caleb Heathcote, an influential landowner in New York, quote, who hath the greatest interest in this present governor of any man in New York.
On June 30th, Mary Newman said that 2 years ago she had an argument with Elizabeth Clausen and exchanged words. The next day, 3 of Newman's sheep died suddenly.
On July 12th, John Tash swore his testimony before John Reynolds in Greenwich.
About 30 years ago, Goodman and Goody Owen asked him to go to George Woosley's house in Jamaica, Long Island, with Mary Staples.
Riding a horse with her behind him, they came to a rough slough, and he couldn't sense her behind him. So he reached back to her and felt nothing. When they got through the slough, Staples was back on the horse. This happened at the same spot on the way to Woolsey's house and on the way back.
John Pettit, August 4th, 1692, Stamford, quote, John Pettit saith that he heard Daniel Westcott's wife say, Kate told her, that there came a fine man to her and told her that her brother was dead and that he would not trouble her no more in 3 weeks.
On August 24th, Jonathan Bell wrote, quote, Daniel Westcott came to my house upon the Saturday before he went to May Court and told me that his maidservant said that there came a gentleman to her that told her that her brother that was at Christopher's was dead, upon which she cried and was sad, and told her that she should have no more fits this 3 weeks.
Susanna Bell testified the same.
That same day, Samuel Blatchley said that Abigail Gross said that Abigail Westcott, Daniel's wife, mentioned Mercy Disborough's name in the presence of Catherine Branch. Abigail Westcott replied that Catherine was in a fit when she said that.
Also on the 24th, Lydia Penoyer related that Catherine Branch told her that she, Catherine, quote, never told Joseph Garnsey and Nathaniel Wyatt that she was possessed.
Quote, she heard her aunt Abigail Westcott say that her servant girl, Catherine Branch, was such a lying girl that not anybody could believe one word what she said, and saith that she heard her aunt Abigail Westcott say that she did not believe that Mercy, nor Goody Miller, nor Hannah, nor any of these women whom she had impeached was any more witches than she was, and that her husband would believe Catherine before he would believe Mr. Bishop or Lieutenant Bell or herself.
Catherine Branch and Daniel Westcott testified before Jonathan Bell on August 25th. Both testified that Catherine was afflicted in her sleep and her head was drawn back to her back.
Quote, he got up and found her head drawn backward to her back, and her body bowed upward a foot from the bed, and her breath stopped.
On August 29th, Joseph Bishop reported that he had asked Catherine what she saw in her fits. She said cats. Abigail Westcott pressed her on it.
Quote, Catherine answered, cats. If they be cats, they are no ordinary cats, for ordinary cats can't turn themselves into a woman and then into a cat again and sit on the rail and jump on the wheel.
Abigail Westcott asked Catherine to describe the woman. She wore, quote, serge cloth and the best homespun. I think she hath pretty thick lips.
In undated testimony, Joseph Garnsey told a story about an experiment performed during one of Catherine's fits to see if she would react when threatened with a knife in real life. She immediately snapped out of her fit and ran out of the room. The experiment was tried again, and she again came to. This time she said, quote, I am possessed with the devil, and he appeared to me in the hen house in the shape of a black cat, and was earnest with her to be a witch, and if she would not, he would tear her in pieces.
Then she said she saw the devil. According to Garnsey, quote, just at this time to my appearance there seemed to dart in at the west window a sudden light across the room. Kate saw the devil as a white dog.
Kate told Garnsey she had seen the devil appear in the shapes of Goody Clausen, Goody Miller, and Mercy Disborough. The devil told her that it was really him.
She said she could not tell. They might be honest women, for aught she knew, or they might be witches.
Nathaniel Wyatt confirmed Joseph Garnsey's testimony.
In undated testimony, Ebenezer Bishop testified that, during a fit, Catherine Branch, quote, said, now they are going to kill me, and crying out very loud that they pinched her on the neck, and calling out that they pinched again. I sitting by her, I took the light and looked upon her neck, and I see a spot, look red, seeming to me as big as a piece of 8. Afterwards it turned blue and blacker, then another part of her skin, and after the second time of her calling, I took the light and looked again, and she pointed with her hand lower upon her shoulder, and I see another place upon her shoulder look red and blue, as I saw upon the other place before, and then after that she had another fit.
Hannah Knapp corroborated Bishop's testimony and added that she saw scratches upon Kate.
In an undated testimony, Abigail Cross said, quote, upon some discourse with Daniel Westcott about his girls dissembling, Daniel said that he would venture both his cows against a calf, that she would do a trick tomorrow morning that nobody else could do.
Abigail asked, can you make her do it when you will?
Daniel said, yes, and when I will, I can make her do it.
Nathaniel Cross corroborated his wife Abigail's testimony.
Abraham Finch Jr. testified that, quote, he being a watching with a French girl at Daniel Westcott's house in the night, I being laid on the bed, the girl fell into a fit and fell across my feet, and then I looking up, I saw a light about the bigness of my 2 hands glance along the summer beam of the house to the hearthward, and afterwards I saw it no more.
Kate said, Goody Clausen came in with 2 fiery eyes.
David Selleck was lying on the bed beside Catherine while Abraham was lying on the chest. David started up and said, she pricked me.
Quote, the French girl answered, no, she did not. It was Goody Crump. And she put her hand over the bedside and said, give me that thing that you pricked Mr. Selleck with. And I catched hold of her hand and found a pin in it, and I took it away from her.
On another occasion, Elizabeth Clausen said, she had not confessed nor would not confess as long as she had breath to draw, or to that effect.
On August 29th, 50-year-old man Samuel Hawley Sr. stated that, quote, being at the house of Daniel Westcott in the evening, I did see his maid Catherine Branch in her fit, that she did swell in her breasts as she lay on her bed, and they rises like bladders, and suddenly passed into her belly, and a short time returned to her breast, and in a short time her breasts fell, and a great rattling in her throat, as if she would have been choked. All this I judge beyond nature.
Daniel Westcott confirmed this testimony and added, quote, that when she was in those fits rattling in her throat, she would put out her tongue to a great extent. I conceived beyond nature, and I put her tongue into her mouth again, and then I looked in her mouth and could see no tongue, but as if it were a lump of flesh down her throat at this often times.
On August 30th, Daniel Westcott said, quote, as she lay on the bed at her length in her fit, and at once sprang up to the chamber floor without the help of her hands or feet, That's near 6 feet, and I judge it beyond nature for any person so to do.
On August 31st, John Knapp confirmed what Daniel Westcott said the day before.
That same day, David Selleck said, quote, in the night when said Catherine was in her fit, she looking off the bed said, Goody Miller, hold up your arm higher, that the black dog may suck thee better. Again she said, Goody Miller, I never thought so much before, for now I am sure you are a witch, for you have got a long teat under your arm.
Abraham Finch, quote, saw a ball of fire as big as his two hands pass along the summer beam to the hearth and then vanish away.
Quote, she said that she saw Goody Clausen come in with fiery eyes.
Lying in bed beside Catherine, with Abraham Finch lying on the chest, David felt a prickling in his side.
Catherine said, Goody Crump, give me that thing that you pricked Mr. Selleck withal. Then shutting her hand, Abraham Finch reached hold of her hand and we found a pin in it.
This should have been seen as clear evidence of fraud.
On September 7th, Sarah Ketchum reported, quote, I asked her to ride, and then she got to riding. I asked her if her horse had any name, and she called out and said Jack. I then asked her to sing, and then she sung. I asked her that if she had sung in English, she could then to sing French, and then she sung that which they called French.
Thomas Austin told Ketchum he knew that Catherine was bewitched. Ketchum said that she doubted it. She didn't believe there was a witch in town.
Then they did an experiment. Thomas Austin said that a bewitched person would laugh themselves to death if a bear's sword was held over them. They tried it, and Catherine laughed. But then they tried it without telling her, and she did not react at all.
John Bates Jr. confirmed Ketchum's testimony.
On September 10th, Edward Jessup testified in Fairfield that last winter at Thomas Gisborough's house, there was a pig roasting with skin, like normal pig. When it was placed on the table, the skin was suddenly gone. But when Thomas Gisborough began cutting it, the skin reappeared.
Later that evening, there was a debate over scripture. When Mercy Gisborough brought out a Bible, Jessup couldn't read it.
On his way home, he needed a canoe to get across Campo Creek, but he couldn't move the canoe into the water.
He tried to ride his old cart horse, Joe, around, but couldn't get the horse to stay on the road.
It took all night to get a little over 2 miles.
On September 12th, Daniel Westcott testified that some years since, he had quarreled with Elizabeth Clausen over the weight of some flax.
Some short time after, Daniel's daughter Johanna was taken with fits.
She continued to have fits at night for about 3 weeks.
Then, upon the advice of neighbors, the Westcotts sent their daughter to Fairfield, and the fits stopped.
Abigail Westcott corroborated the testimony.
On September 12th, Abigail Westcott claimed that Elizabeth Clausen once threw rocks at her.
Another time, Clausen called her a, quote, proud slut, and said, quote, are you proud of your fine clothes and you love to be mistress, but you never shall be mine.
Daniel Westcott's enslaved indigenous boy saw a string tie itself around Catherine's neck.
Abigail Westcott witnessed the marks around Kate's neck after Daniel removed the string.
Thomas Penoyer said that Goodwife Clausen argued with Mary Newman, whose daughter had allegedly stolen, quote, apples or nuts or grapes or some such thing. Clausen said, if she allowed her children to steal when they was young, how would they be when they were old?
Thomas' wife, Lydia, agreed to his testimony.
Sarah Bates said that when Kate had the first fits, the Westcott sent for her to attend to the girl. Upon evaluating the girl, Bates decided she may have a natural illness.
She suggested they burn feathers under Kate's nose and also suggested a few other remedies for fainting fits.
While Kate was in a fit, Sarah Bates and Abigail Westcott decided to bleed her. When they approached to draw blood, Kate snapped out of the fit.
Then she did let them take blood from her foot, and when she had laid a while, quote, she clapped her hand upon the coverlid and cried out. And one of the girls that stood by said, Mother, she cried out. And her mistress was so affected with it that she cried and said, she is bewitched. Upon this, the girl turned her head from the folk as if she would hide it in the pillow and laughed.
Mary Lockwood confirmed this testimony.
Swimming test witnesses Abraham Adams and Jonathan Squire made a statement.
Both testified that, quote, when Elizabeth Clausen was bound hand and foot and put into the water, she swam like a cork, and Joseph Sturg labored to press her into the water, and she buoyed up like a cork.
Court of Oyer and Terminer, September 14th at Fairfield.
Magistrates Governor Robert Treat, Deputy Governor William Jones, Major Nathan Gold, John Allen, Mr. Andrew Leet, Captain John Burr, Mr. William Pitkin, and Captain Moses Mansfield.
Crown's attorneys, Lieutenant James Bennett and Mr. LaFollette Hill.
Mercy Disborough was arraigned.
The grand jury indicted her.
Disborough pled not guilty and agreed to stand trial.
Elizabeth Clausen was arraigned.
The grand jury indicted her as well.
Disborough and Clausen were searched yet again by a jury of women.
This time, Clausen had, quote, in her private parts more than is common to women. We can't say teats, but something extraordinary. And Goody Disborough's was something like it, but a great deal less. Goody Clausen's a dark red, and Disborough's of a pale color.
Catherine Brunch testified September 19th, quote, sometime this last summer, she saw and felt Goodwife Clausen and Mercy Disborough afflict her not together, but apart by scratching, pinching, and wringing her body.
The grand jury presented Mary Staples, Mary Harvey, and Hannah Harvey.
The court called 3 times for witnesses on September 15th and then again called for witnesses on September 16th.
Only 2 witnesses appeared, quote, and what was objected seemed to be of no great weight.
The court cleared the 3 women by proclamation.
The jury could not reach a verdict on Clausen or Disborough.
Court sent to the general court for advice.
And sent the prisoners to jail.
The court was dismissed until a response was received from the general court.
On October 13th, the general court ordered a new court session to be held ASAP.
Court reconvened on October 28th in Fairfield.
Disborough was convicted. The court sent the jury to reconsider. They didn't change their verdict. The court accepted it, and the governor issued the death sentence.
Clausen was acquitted. The court accepted this and agreed to release Clausen from jail upon payment of her jail fees.
The court sought advice from the clergy.
On October 17th, Joseph Elliott, Timothy Woodbridge, and unnamed others responded.
They said the swimming test is unlawful evidence.
Quote, the unusual excrescences found upon their bodies ought not to be allowed as evidence against them without the approbation of some able physicians.
They further said that Catherine Branch may have dissembled, and he can't trust spectral evidence because it may be counterfeited by the devil, so she's not a reliable witness.
Quote, as to the other strange accidents, as the dying of cattle, etc., we apprehend the applying of them to these women as matters of witchcraft to be upon very slender and uncertain grounds.
Richard Holmes testified on October 27th in Norwalk before Thomas Fitch.
But my mother, a midwife, told me that the report was true and that Elizabeth Clausen was not as other women were.
John Finch testified on October 28th in Stamford that about a year ago, he had a difference with Elizabeth Clausen. Soon, a child was ill for 2 weeks and died.
On May 12, 1693, Magistrate Samuel Willis, William Pitkin, and Nathaniel Stanley issued a defense of the reprieve of Mrs. Mercy Disborough.
For one thing, they had the authority to do so.
They had the reasons to believe the death penalty was not appropriate for Disborough.
The jury was altered between court sessions. Quote, one man altered, the jury is altered.
We had a good account of the evidences given against her that none of them amounted to what Mr. Perkins, Mr. Bernard, and Mr. Mather with others state as sufficiently convictive of witchcraft.
There was no confession.
They did not have 2 good witnesses to prove works above the course of nature.
Quote, as for the common things of spectral evidence, ill events after quarrels or threats, teats, water trials, and the like with suspicious words, they are all discarded, and some of them abominated by the most judicious as to be convicted of witchcraft.
Further, the witch hunt in Salem proves these things are nothing but trouble and, quote, will make hanging work apace.
And at some point, Deputy Governor William Jones wrote out a document called Grounds for Examination of a Witch, which we've previously read on this podcast, in Connecticut Witch Trials 101, Part 1.
Gershom Buckley later wrote a brief summary of what happened in 1692, saying, quote, "A time was appointed for execution, but, upon motion, 3 of the assistants of Hartford send down a reprieve, whereby the execution is suspended till next general court."
In 1693, Hugh Croce of Fairfield was accused of witchcraft after he claimed he had made a pact with Satan and sealed it with his blood. The indictment also referred to Croce afflicting unspecified people.
Croce admitted in court that he had lied about the pact with the devil.
On May 8th, the grand jury returned the indictment ignoramus, meaning there was not enough evidence to go to trial.
Croce was released upon payment of jail fees.
Here's the story of accused witches from a founding family in Wallingford. The victims were Winifred Benham Sr. and Winifred Benham Jr. This family, like the Staples Harvey family, included 3 generations of women targeted as witches in a direct line of descendants. As the mother of Winifred Sr., Mary Hale was tried as a witch in Boston, Massachusetts, about a decade before.
The genealogy story of Winifred Benham Sr. has been confusing due to the complexity around her name origins and the thin trail of her mother's marriages and court case. We won't get into that today because what we can know of the Benham women's link to Mother Mary Hale is through court record statements and family connections through legal records.
Winifred Benham Sr. and Winifred Jr. can likely be linked as the daughter and granddaughter of accused Boston witch Mary Hale by looking at court records. Winifred Sr. and Mary Hale both gave their testimonies in a deposition in a 1656 lawsuit for Hugh Williams. This is pieced together in the July 2007 American Genealogist article called Origin of Accused Witch Mary Williams King Hale of Boston and Her Brothers Hugh, John, and possibly Nathaniel Williams by Michael J. Leclerc and D. Brenton Simons.
In their depositions, Mary refers to, quote, her brother's house, and Winifred refers to, quote, her uncle's house in the lawsuit, naming Hugh Williams as the brother and uncle. The article goes on to explain how record evidence connects the Williams brothers together and to Mary Hale and Winifred Benham Sr. The article further establishes this link with trial records from the 1680-81 witchcraft case of Mary Hale, wherein she identifies Winifred's daughter Joanna Benham, born 1662, as her granddaughter, as well as a deposition from Joanna in the case where she identifies herself as Mary Hale's granddaughter.
Witchcraft charges against Mary Hale in February and March 1681 stemmed from the suspicious death of Michael Smith, a mariner who had formerly lodged at Mary Hale's house and who had attempted to court her granddaughter, Joanna Benham. Smith claimed shortly before his death that Mary had bewitched him while he was at the Isles of Shoals and at Bilboa, and further that in a separate incident, she transported him to Dorchester, where he encountered a coven of witches.
After his courtship with Joanna failed, Smith began seeing another young woman named Margaret Ellis of Boston, who became one of the chief accusers against Mary Hale when the mariner died under strange circumstances. According to the article, among the unusual witchcraft evidence used against Mary was a test using a bottle containing Smith's urine. When the bottle was stopped, Mary moved to and fro in an agitated manner throughout the house. When it was unstopped, her movements ceased. It is unclear whether Mary Hale was convicted because no further records have been identified yet. We have no record of her life after this. We do not know when or where she died.
Mary Hale's daughter and granddaughter, Winifred Benham Sr. and Jr., were also destined to endure witchcraft charges.
Winifred Sr. had moved with her husband Joseph in 1670 Wallingford, Connecticut, before her mother Mary Hale's trial. Joseph Benham, like his father John Benham, was one of the 37 founders of Wallingford. We know what land the Benham men held in Wallingford and that they had meeting house seat assignments in Wallingford as well.
Legal troubles for the family began in 1691, when Joseph Benham was tried for describing the selectmen of Wallingford as, quote, no more fit for townsmen than dogs. In the following year, he threatened a neighbor, Goody Parker, with his gun for casting aspersions of witchcraft upon Winifred. Joseph had already had his mother-in-law and daughter Joanna embroiled in a witchcraft trial in Boston. In 1692, several townsfolk, such as Hannah Parker, Deacon Hall, and Anna Street, approached Reverend Samuel Street for guidance, and together reported a formal complaint against Winifred Benham to the county court. Winifred Sr. was charged at the New Haven County Court for witchcraft, but the court found insufficient grounds to convict her.
It appears she pleaded innocent and did not implicate others as witches. She was released with the warning that more suspicion would bring more charges. It is believed that in June of 1693, there was further examination about witchcraft, but we currently have no record.
In 1697, Winifred Benham Sr. was accused of witchcraft again, this time along with her 12 or 13-year-old daughter, Winifred Benham Jr. Winifred Sr. and Winifred Jr. were sent by local officials to High Court for witchcraft charges to the Superior Court in Hartford.
With no further witch trial cases on record, this leaves the Winifreds as the last two accused witches sent by local officials to a higher court in the New England colonies.
The court records indicate that present were Robert Treat Esquire, Governor, William Jones Esquire, Deputy Governor, and Major Moses Mansfield, Assistant.
The accusers represented at this trial were Ebenezer Clark, Joseph Roys, and John Moss Jr.
They testified that Sarah Clark, daughter of Ebenezer Clark, John Moss III, son of John Moss Jr., and Elizabeth Lathrop, were physically harmed by the apparitions and witchcraft of Winifred Benham Sr. and Winifred Benham Jr., or by the devil in their shapes. Joseph Benham was ordered to pay £21 for their appearance and for them to be jailed until the next convening of the court in October.
On October 7, 1697, the Court of Assizes met in Hartford, and prosecutor Daniel Clark argued that Winifred Benham Sr. and Winifred Benham Jr. of Wallingford had made dealings with Satan, and, through this relationship, had been causing mischief around the town of Wallingford, hurting numerous people and disturbing the peace. They were also accused of causing the death of a baby.
More details on the Winifred Benham Sr. witch trial saga appear in the writing of Robert Galliff in his More Wonders of the Invisible World. He reported that she was searched for teats and water tested. This is where it is stated that the Winifreds were acquitted in the 1697 trial and fled to New York.
Like her mother, we lose the trail of Winifred Benham Sr. We do not know when or where she died, or when or where she is buried.
John Benham, son of Winifred Sr. and Joseph Sr., was a resident of Kings County, New York, and two of the Benham daughters, Anna and Sarah, were then living in Richmond. In the records of the Dutch Church on Staten Island, it states that Anna Benham and her husband Lambert Johnson had a daughter with the namesake Winifred, who was baptized in 1696. As this family was already on Staten Island, Winifred Benham Sr. may have fled here, as Caliph reported.
More than one granddaughter was named Winifred after the Benham Winifreds. I am a descendant of Winifred Sr. through her son Joseph Jr. I have been contacted by several descendants in the past year looking for more information on how she is being remembered by the community, including one descending line that had passed down the oral history of Winifred Sr. being an accused witch. This was passed down to the current living generation, all the way down to living grandsons. That is touching. This past March 1st, at the Judiciary Committee hearing on H.J. 34, resolution concerning certain witchcraft convictions in colonial Connecticut, I gave in-person testimony as a descendant. It was an unexplainable, proud experience to be able to give testimony in support of a state exoneration for my accused witch ancestor. The state representative representing Wallingford, along with others, voted no against the resolution at the judiciary hearing. But support for H.J. 34 kept growing, and legislators representing Wallingford later voted yes in the House and Senate. After an amendment to the resolution in the House, State Representative Craig Fishbein did change his original stance against the resolution, and after voting no on March 1st, he voted yes on May 10th, that accused witches Winifred Benham Sr. and Winifred Benham Jr., women of a founding family from his district, did deserve an apology for what happened to them.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Your testimony was excellent.
Sarah Clother and Goodwife Brown were accused of witchcraft by Bethiah Taylor of Colchester in 1713. Taylor withdrew the charge and apologized in public.
Sarah Spencer was accused of bewitching her sister-in-law, Elizabeth Ackley, in 1724. Spencer sued Ackley for £500 damages for defamation and won £5.
In 1742, Elizabeth Gold of Guildford sued Benjamin Chittenden for £500 for defamation. The court found for the defendant Chittenden due to an insufficient declaration by the plaintiff Gold. And now Mary Bingham is back with another great Minute with Mary.
May 25th, 2023, the day when those accused, convicted, and hanged for the capital crime of witchcraft in colonial Connecticut were finally cleared. This is the day I will never forget. The first order of business for me was to travel the 2 hours south to Hartford from my hometown in New Hampshire and arrive by 11 a.m. All I wanted was to be with the people, my people, who worked tirelessly since May 26th of 2022 to secure justice for these victims who lived over 3 centuries ago. They lived in our hearts in an indescribable way that day. Not knowing the city of Hartford, I wound up parking at the old State House, thinking it was close to the Capitol. Wrong. I ran 15 minutes clear across town in sandals that would have no doubt twisted a smaller ankle than mine, and I almost fell into a sinkhole as I rushed across the further side of Bushnell Park. When I entered the Capitol after going through security and then ascending 4 floors to the gallery, I was never so happy to greet my fellow team members with warm hugs and smiles. Then the wait for final passage of our bill, HJ 34, began. We weren't sure how long that would be before the bill came before the Senate, early in the afternoon or closer to midnight. So we listened to some of the other important bills presented that day, went for lunch in the cafeteria, hung outside the gallery and talked, and then went downstairs for ice cream. At 4:30, some of us were still downstairs when the urgent text came through that our bill was now before the Senate. We ran up 4 flights of stairs in record time for the final time that afternoon. When I took my seat, I felt like everything was surreal. I listened as the senator spoke for well over an hour. Final passage of this bill meant so much to us, the descendants, those who still suffer brutally as a result of active witch hunts today, as well as those who risk their lives advocating for the modern day victims. We knew from firsthand knowledge that other countries watched to see what the state of Connecticut would do. At about 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the bill passed. Connecticut had corrected the historical record for the world to see. What joy and exhilaration I felt as tears of relief fell from my eyes for about 10 minutes straight. I was so grateful to finally meet and thank in person State Representative Jane Garibay and State Senator Dr. Saud Anwar, who were workhorses on behalf of this bill. Then I got my private wishes to celebrate with my team members over good food and a nice glass of wine. The following day, I realized my ultimate dream when I knelt down and ran my fingers through the earth where both Alice Young and Lydia Gilbert lived and walked. Another most wonderful part of this journey, to meet people who have not only become friends, but who have become my family. We will always have the shared historical experience that is special to us. Sarah, Josh, Beth, and Tony, thank you for making it special.
Thank you, Mary.
And here's Sarah with End Witch Hunts News.
End Witch Hunt News. Quote, the world redeemed from superstition's sway is breathing freer for thy sake today. By John Greenleaf Whittier, a Quaker poet. These are the last lines of the memorial poem on the Rebecca Nurse Monument at her Homestead Museum. Breathing freer for thy sake today. The power of breathing is life. Life is powered by breath, inhaled and exhaled from our lungs. Draw it in with me. This breath saturated the moments of the witch trials of the 17th century American colonies. Breath was huffed and panted in affliction. Breath was held and paused in fear. Fleeting breaths wheezed and gasped. Breath was crushed from lungs with weight. Breath choked and spit as it condemned. The last breathed words hung from the gallows. The last gasp. The dying breath delivered the final twitch. Then the hunt ran out of air, and these hunts ceased. Now let's exhale. with easy, resting breath. Rebecca and her fellow persecuted accused witches are at rest. They've been acknowledged by their descendants in society, are memorialized through education, monuments, ceremonies, family societies, media, the arts, books, poems, photographs, podcasts, and conversations between us all over the world. But reality is the world is not free to breathe, redeemed from superstitions. Witch hunts truly continue. The vulnerable who are hunted are holding their breath in fear, and we who are not hunted must continue to use our breath to teach. Now I'm going to breathe down your neck about ending witch hunts. The witch hunts of today are more than a remnant of witch trials and witch hunts past. Like before, women, men, and children are blamed for misfortune and curses. They are unjustly punished. They are still using their breath to plead their innocence. They do not want to suffer. We must keep working to make people aware that witch hunts are not the result of superstition and hysteria, but rather a natural human reaction to pressure and strife, an impulse we must understand in order to control. The same factors which led to Salem are present today. There are always multiple factors that are repeatedly found in combination. Single bullet theories ignore the human fear of the other that is behind it all. Vocal advocates in countries gripped by witch hunts are asking us for acknowledgement and support. Listen to them and talk about what they are telling us. Join them as they wish to memorialize and remember their victims. Accused witch memorialization and remembrance helps us grieve, and it connects us with ancestors, modern victims, and all fellow human beings who suffer this injustice. It teaches us to make things right when we can, to keep working for a world safe from witch hunts against the vulnerable. Continue to expand the remembrance of witch trial victims in your community's history and of all witch hunt victims. Thou Shalt Not Suffer podcast supports the efforts to end witch hunts. You can learn more by visiting our websites and the websites listed in our show notes for more information about country-specific advocacy groups. Get involved. Visit endwitchhunts.org. To support us, purchase books from our bookshop, merch from our Zazzle shop, or make a financial contribution to our organization. Our links are in the show description.
Thank you, Sarah, for that excellent report.
You're welcome.
And thank you for listening to Thou Shalt Not Suffer, the Witch Trial podcast.
Join us next week.
Subscribe wherever you get podcasts.
Visit thoushallnotsuffer.com.
Remember to tell your friends about the show.
Support our efforts to end witch hunts. Visit endwitchhunts.org to learn more.
Have a great today and a beautiful tomorrow.